Welcome to Every Mom is an Athlete, the podcast where we believe motherhood is inherently athletic. From lifting car seats to chasing toddlers, your daily life is a workout. I'm Dr. Karlie, pregnancy and postpartum expert, sports chiropractor, strength coach, and mom of 3. This is your space for strength, recovery, and real talk in pregnancy, postpartum, and motherhood. Welcome, Strong Moms. You're in the right place. Welcome back, Strong Moms, to our 4th episode of Postpartum Pains. Today, we are talking about something I see every single day in my office, which is low back pain or pelvic pain after having a baby. And I'm not just talking like within the first couple of months or weeks or anything like that. I'm talking about like in general. Like I have seen women who years and years later are having low back pain, and it's basically been since they had their baby and they haven't been able to figure it out, or they just haven't figured it out, or whatever the case is. But I love helping women with this because it is so fixable. There's so much we can do. There's so much strengthening and mobility and stability. And so we're going to go over all of that today. So if you're having low back pain, you are going to love this episode. But if you have a friend who you've heard complain about her low back or her pelvis hurting, please send her this episode. I just really, truly hope that it will be able to help her. So let's first talk about what's actually going on and why it's so common to have low back or pelvic pain after you've had a baby. And it seems pretty self-explanatory on some level, right? Like your body goes through a huge change. You have this massive abdominal stretching. You have all of these hormonal changes, like relaxin is loosening and lengthening and changing the actual shape of your pelvis and your ribs and all of that stuff. There's a lot of stress on your pelvic floor. Even if you don't have a vaginal birth, if you have a C-section, you still have a lot of stress through the pregnancy of that baby and that extra weight kind of bearing down or pushing down on your pelvic floor. And then also you're changing the way you move all through your pregnancy. As your body's changing, our bodies will just compensate however they can to keep us moving and doing the things we want to do. And so that's another thing that I see is people have changed the way that they move, the way that they sit, the way that they hold their back or their pelvis. And that can translate into issues once that baby has come out. So what does this lead to? Obviously, if you're listening to this episode, you probably already know your low back can be achy. You can have just sort of that deep nagging hip pain. Sometimes people say it's like in their upper butt or in their glutes. You could have pain when you're rolling over in bed or getting up from the couch, when you're carrying your baby. Or what I hear a lot is just that women feel really unstable in their low back. And something I like to remind people of here is that when that baby is in your belly, they are actually helping stabilize your spine because everything is like full in there, right? Your organs have shifted around. This baby is growing. Everything is like full and tight and barely fits, right? Well, then the baby comes out, your organs have to reshift, everything's moving around. And so this is actually a really common time to feel pretty unstable because now your spine doesn't have anything pressing up against it. And it's like, whoa, where are we? And if you don't have strong low back muscles, a strong deep core, then this can take a really long time to get back to feeling like it's normal or strong or just not like off. So here is where I'm going to say something that might feel a little controversial, but I think that most postpartum advice that people are getting is either really vague or it's just wrong. So you'll hear a lot that you need to wait 6 weeks to do any exercise, you need to rest, you need to let your body heal, just start with some Kegels. And those are all pieces of advice. I don't know if they're good or not. It really depends on who you are and what you're doing and how your body responds to things. But that's not the whole picture. That's not focusing on how things are going to actually improve. I like to use this analogy in my office of a bike. So if you had a bike and it gets a flat tire and you just stuck your bike in the corner and you were like, I'm just going to let it rest. It needs to rest. When you came back in 6 weeks, your bike would still have a flat tire, right? Like you didn't do anything to help your bike improve and function better. You just let it rest. So our bodies obviously are a little more complex than bikes, but it's the same idea. If you just let yourself rest, yes, there is some tissue healing that needs to occur, especially if you had a C-section, if you had a semi-traumatic vaginal birth. But there's so much that we can do to actually be improving our pelvic floor, our core, and our low back muscles. And all those things are going to help lead us to not having this low back and pelvic pain. So let's talk about the pieces that I see people doing wrong. Number one would be thinking that this pain is normal. It's just part of motherhood. It's normal because you had a baby that your low back and your pelvis would hurt. This is not true. If you've listened to anything I say over all the years, it's that while things can be common, it doesn't make them normal. And so just accepting this is really not the answer. There is always help. There's always something that you can be doing, especially for these physical pains. The second thing is I see people jumping back into exercise too fast and workouts too fast. And yes, one breath ago, I literally just said you should be working out sooner than 6 weeks, but you should be doing the right things: breathing, bracing of the core, engaging the deep core muscles and the glutes, which are directly connected into the pelvic floor. All of these things are going to be restorative. I'm not talking about throwing around big or even little weights in those first couple weeks. I'm talking about reconnecting your breath and your body and these movement patterns that have been changed over so many months that we need to re-coordinate. The third thing is just not paying attention to the core and pelvic floor connection. They really, truly do work together. So think about your pelvic floor, okay? Think about that as like the bottom of the barrel. And then you have the top of the barrel, which is your diaphragm. So that's your main breathing muscle. It's basically like under your ribs, okay? So these guys are like parallel to each other, top and bottom of the barrel. And then all around, you have your other core muscles, which are stabilizing you, okay? But the way that these two work together is as you breathe in, take a big breath in, the pelvic floor and the diaphragm move down as your lungs kind of fill with air. And as you breathe out, they move up. And so you can use this natural rhythm of how your pelvic floor and your diaphragm work to start engaging the pelvic floor, the deep core muscles, without having to think about, okay, now let me do a Kegel, let me engage my pelvic floor. At first, you can use this breathing and using that sort of like breath, like you're breathing through a straw, that like sort of aggressive breath, that will engage that pelvic floor. And so you can start building that connection literally just with your breathing. And that's what I have people do in my office and also in all of my postpartum plans is within that first couple weeks, you can start these breathing exercises and they will make a big difference. I remember I sort of used to poo-poo breathing exercises before I got into this sort of work. And even before I had kids, I was like, yes, the breathing is important. I understand the anatomy. Got it. And then I had my first son and I was like, oh, after that diaphragm has just been so crammed up there from the baby, it doesn't expand and move and like do everything how it's supposed to do right away. And so you really do have to use this breathing work to get that moving again. And in response, the pelvic floor also moving in coordination. So, okay, that's a little tangent, a little bit on my soapbox, but you have to address these if you really want to get back to high functioning, high levels of physical activity. The other thing I see people do is, or I hear in my office sometimes, is, well, I've been doing my Kegels. But the thing is, we don't always know if you need Kegels or not. Some people, their pelvic floor is too tight. And so even if you have had a baby, yes, likely some Kegel, some kind of pelvic floor engagement work is going to be helpful, but not just alone. That's not like the whole picture. There's got to be other stuff that we're doing. So what actually helps? This is all good and well, Karlie, but tell us what to do. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing is what I was just talking about, basically, which is reconnecting that deep core. You hear a lot about the transverse abdominis, and this is a big flat ab muscle that wraps around from your back all the way around to the front. And this is the muscle that when you're pregnant, like if you're watching Instagram and you see the videos of women like where it looks like they're sucking their baby in, it's like they have a big belly and then they pull it in. This is the main muscle that they're using to do that. Interestingly enough, this muscle is also one of the actions of it is to help push your baby out. So it's one of the reasons that I stress so much during pregnancy, using your core and working on pregnancy safe core exercises. It's the whole reason I built my Prego Core plan. Because if you really focus on this and keep this strong during pregnancy, it gets way easier to use it and engage it and tie it back into your rehab postpartum. So it's not sucking in. You're not like sucking your stomach in. The best way I like to cue people in my office is, okay, so try this. Take a big breath in. Now, as you breathe out, use that kind of aggressive breath again. And as you do that, pull your two hip bones together. So try and use the muscles between your two hip bones and try to pull them together. That you feel right there, you have to do it lightly. Okay, if you do it too much, you hit a different group of muscles and you actually kind of start to pull stuff apart. So just very lightly, try to pull those two hip bones together. That movement is engaging your transverse abdominis. So this is one really simple way that you can start to activate that. And again, remember, it connects to your spine. So this will help stabilize your spine and then all the way around. It kind of like wraps around you like a corset. So great place to start with that breathing and engagement. Now, next, you can coordinate this with your pelvic floor. And this isn't necessarily about like, squeeze and Kegel as hard as you can, but it's just a light lift. So as you breathe out, you can kind of focus on that light lift. I like to think of like trying to pick up a blueberry with your lady parts, if you will, just very lightly. And then you also want to relax it. So you want that full contract and then that full relax. One thing I have patients in my office do when they come in with back pain or pelvic pain is also start moving very intentionally. So certain movements like transitional movements where you go from seated to standing or sitting to lying down or lying down to sitting up, like any of those movements, really think about this breathing and also bracing your core. So like if I was going to punch you in the stomach, that's how you should brace your core as you're doing these transitional movements so that everything is engaged and stable. And it might not feel as strong as you're used to it feeling at first, but that will help stabilize your spine and things won't be quite so wobbly. The next thing we want to do is work on both some mobility and some stability. So what I see most in, especially new moms who are still nursing, even if you're not, you're still just sitting so much more than you're used to. And lots of times, like kind of melting into the couch, you're tired, you're in these weird positions. So there's a few postural changes we can make. Make sure you're sitting up on your sits bones, switch places that you're sitting. So I love people to have like one of the big exercise balls to bounce on. Babies love that anyways. So that can be helpful. It's also a little more forgiving on your tailbone and your pelvis. Try to switch positions or spots on the couch that you sit or in your bed. And then, like I said, make sure that your back is supported. But then what you can also do is mobilize your hips, because as you're sitting so much, the front side of those hips, your hip flexors, get just really so tight, so much tighter than they are when you're up and moving around so much more. So doing some hip flexor stretching can be really helpful. That's one thing that's built into my postpartum plan, because I just know pretty much every new mom needs upper back mobility because we're like hunched forward so much, and then also hip mobility because we sit so much. So stretching out the front of the hips and then the upper back, very key. And then as far as strengthening goes, we need to strengthen those low back muscles. So the way you can do this is Supermans, some banded good mornings, anything that's going to use those low back muscles generally feels pretty darn good. In my office, I have women get up onto this low back extension bench and hold themselves there, even through pregnancy. And almost all of them, especially during pregnancy, are surprised that they feel better when they get off of it. But as I explain it, it makes sense, right? Because during pregnancy and during breastfeeding, remember, we have all these hormones, we have relaxin that's loosening things up. So all you have is the muscles to stabilize everything. So you get those low back muscles firing, and then all of a sudden things feel a little better because your pelvis is being held in a nice, stable position. Before we go, I want to just also mention a few red flags, right? So if you have numbness, tingling, weakness, anything like that, sharp or really worsening, like over days and weeks pain, for sure, please get in to see your doctor. Pelvic floor PT or a Webster certified or sports chiropractor can be really, really helpful in getting your pelvis moving and just making sure everything is moving properly, and then also help you get some exercises to stabilize. Also, of course, if you haven't done any postpartum rehab, it is never too late for that. My postpartum plan and also the C-section plan is designed to be done in 20 to 25 minutes a day. It's full body. It's 4 days a week for 8 weeks. Lots of women do those weeks over just because they feel like they want to focus on a certain movement or get a little more stable. So I'll put the link in the show notes below, but just know that it is never too late to start some sort of rehab to make sure that you're engaging the pelvic floor and your core and all those muscles properly. All right, strong moms, I hope this episode was helpful. Next week, we are going to be talking about what to do if you've had a C-section and how to recover and rehab from that. So have a great week, and I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening. Every Mom is an Athlete isn't just a podcast. It's a reminder that you're still the athlete you've always been. If this episode resonated with you, I'd so appreciate it if you'd share with a friend or leave a quick review. It helps more moms find the support and information they need. See you next time.